Okay, so how do you come up with your big idea if you're still working on your big idea? And this also applies if you have an idea, but you really need to fine tune it. You can take all of the things we're going to talk about here and apply them to your current idea so that you can make it stronger. So the good news is that there are lots of ways to come up with a great idea for your business. So you want to get started by asking yourself, what's next? What's coming? Look at the trends, look at how tech is changing, look at how the world is changing. What will we need? What will we want? How will we feel? There have been massive changes across the world in the last few years, and there's of course more coming, and it has really changed the market in almost every industry. So you want to look at your idea that you already have or the idea you're thinking about, and really make sure that you're tailoring it to where the market is going, right? So you want to, if you're maybe starting thinking about doing some kind of maybe, I don't know, nail service. Could you do that mobile? Could you do something so that people can do that at home? Can you make that? People have become very used to being able to do almost everything from their homes now. So if you can add that into your service, that gives you a new opportunity. So really look at what the trends are, and it's not just to do with the pandemic over the last few years. There's a lot of other changes that have taken place as well. So look at the trends, look at how the world is changing and what we are going to need, where we're headed. You want to look for a new niche. That's a great way to find an idea. So again, look at those changes that have happened in the past few years and what new markets that's created and what new niches might have evolved that you can get into. You can also apply your skills to an entirely new field. So you may have skills that are common in your field, but look around you and see where you can apply those skills where they might create innovation. So let's say you are an engineer. Maybe you can create a new product in a new industry. Let's say you are a chef and you know, it's quite common. Everybody in your industry, in your field knows how to cook clearly, but how do you take those skills and apply them to an entirely new field? So maybe you start creating recipes for home cooks to create, you know, gourmet meals at home. That would be taking your skills and applying it somewhere where it hasn't been applied before. You can also look for underserved markets. So what that means is if there's a successful business model that you're interested in pursuing, but you feel like there's a lot of competition out there already and the market maybe is saturated, look to see how well that market is really being served. So are there certain populations, are there certain regions, maybe segments of the market that aren't being served? How can you reach them and change that business model to serve them better? So I'll give you an example for that as well. Let's say you wanted to get into clothing. You wanted to produce a clothing line. That's a pretty saturated market. There's a lot of competition out there. It's very hard to differentiate yourself. But if you look at the market and you say, okay, well, wait a minute, this particular ethnic group cannot get the type of clothing that they like, or this particular body type cannot get the clothing that they like, or maybe this particular, you know, region of the country it does not have a lot of options. Whatever that happens to be, that's a great way to find that underserved market and really tap into it and differentiate yourself and come up with your particular business idea. One of my favorites is to follow your passion. And this is my favorite because if you're really passionate about something, you're very likely going to understand the market for it. You're going to know that market, and you're also going to be more likely to see it through when things get tough, because things are going to get tough. No matter how you do this, things are going to get tough from time to time. And if you're really passionate about it, you are going to be able to stick with it and see it through. So think about something, and quite often something that you're passionate about and you think maybe you couldn't even start a business to do with that particular passion. There's often a way to do it. Almost all the time we can come up with some kind of business idea. If you're passionate about something, there are hundreds of thousands of other people that are probably passionate about the same thing. So how can you serve them? And what do you wish existed around your passion that doesn't, that you could create? So that's an exciting one to look at when you're looking for your idea. You could talk to your friends and family as well. Ask them what they see you as an expert at or really skilled at. Like, what would they come to you for advice on? That's a great way to find your little niche, something that you're very good at as well. And then you can get super niched. So if there is something that you're familiar with, but is really specific that you could serve, the more specific, the better. So for example, when we're talking about niching down, if you were selling marketing services, that's very broad, right? That's everybody everywhere. Pretty much anyone that has anything to do with a business could probably use some marketing services. But if you niche that down, if you make that smaller, you say, okay, well, I'm going to sell only digital marketing service. Still pretty big, but it's smaller than just general marketing services. But then if you niche down further, you could say, okay, I'm going to sell digital marketing services only to the cruise industry. That's very niche. And the beauty of that is that you become the expert in that field. You become the go-to for all of those people. So it goes against, we think we want to help everybody, we want to sell to everybody. That gives us a big market, but it doesn't really. What that does is give us a lot of competitors. So by really niching down and becoming a specialist in something, you become the go-to expert. And this really helps you when you're starting out. So you can get super niche. That's a great way to come up with an idea. And one more way to come up with a really great business idea is to use the problem first approach. So think of a few problems that you've experienced yourself, decide which one you'd like to solve, and then what the answer might be to that problem. And again, if this is a problem that you've experienced, you're going to understand the market for it because you are the market for it. So it makes it so much easier for your first business. So think about what product or service might help answer that problem. And if you're looking for inspiration, there are a ton of sites you can go to as well. You can go to things like Trend Hunter or Kickstarter and get inspiration. And I'm not suggesting you go and take other people's ideas, but I think as you go through that, I know I always do. When I go through those sites, I come up with all sorts of great ideas, just inspired by things that I've seen there, or they make me think of something else. So you can check those out. Trend Hunter, Kickstarter, actually any crowdfunding platform has got all sorts of great ideas. All right, so I've got some action items for you. Number one, you want to brainstorm your idea. Number two, you want to get feedback from your friends, family, from your target market. Take the feedback from your friends and family with a grain of salt. If they are not your target market, then they probably don't have the most valuable feedback for you. Friends and family is always kind of a touchy area because they're not always your biggest cheerleaders with stuff like this. But get feedback very specifically from your target market or people that you feel would be in your target market. And then also you can join. We have a community of women founders, other women starting their businesses. And if you want to get feedback from those women, you want to, have some people to support you on your way, I'm going to drop that link in the comments. It is free to join, and it is not for promotions. This is all just women starting their businesses or growing their businesses that are there to support each other. So I've just dropped it in the comments. You're welcome to join us there as well. Okay. So that is the first part, finding your idea. Number two, make sure your idea is going to be successful by testing it with a minimum viable product. So before you dive in with your big idea, wouldn't it be great if you could somehow know ahead of time that it was actually going to be successful? You had a crystal ball, just know that it's going to sell. Well, the great news is that there is actually a way to do that. And it's one of the most commonly skipped steps in building your business. But if we all did this, we would have so much greater chance of success. So here's the secret. It is testing your product with a minimum viable product. A minimum viable product is basically just the smallest thing that you can put out to your market to test whether they actually want it. So it's a great opportunity to make sure there's a demand. All you're trying to do is get your idea in front of your ideal customers, see what they think of it, get their feedback, and then take that back to improve your product or change your product or do whatever you need to do, right? That's basically what a minimum viable product is. There's a few different ways to do that depending on what your product or service is. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So it's a great way to test your idea, excuse me, before you sink a lot of time and money into it. And, assuming your idea turns out to be solid, it's also going to give you real world feedback and ideas on how to enter that market with a stronger product or service that's better suited to your market's needs. So this works for both physical products and services. So as with anything marketing, you always want to start with market research. This is the first most critical step. And I know we always skip it. We think we know. But if you don't do research, you're just guessing. So you need to do your research. So you want to conduct surveys, ask around, look at your competition. The more information you have, the more likely you are to succeed. So once you've done some research and you've got a really good handle on who your market is going to be, there's a few different ways to test it. One of my favorites for multiple reasons, if it applies to your product, is pre-selling. So all you really need to invest in here is prototype, some high quality marketing materials like photos and videos. The added bonus to this method is you actually get the funding from the pre-sale up front to help you pay to produce the actual product. So this is, you can use crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter or I Fund Women, Indiegogo. If you have a large audience already, you can actually launch that pre-sale to the audience on your website or your social media, wherever your audience is. But if you don't have an audience, you get to tap into existing audiences on those crowdfunding platforms. So you get to test your product, you get feedback on your product, you get the money upfront to produce your product, and you're also building your audience before you've really had any risk and put out any money into producing that product or putting together that service. So if pre-selling works for your particular product or service, that's a great way to go. Perhaps you have an online course idea. Well, a great way to test that and to produce a minimum viable product for that so that you can get that information back from your market is to start by selling some live webinars. It's going to save you the costs of months and months of preparation. And then if you follow up with a Q&A session, it's actually going to help you develop your material for the actual course launch so you hit the target right out of the gate. You can test products and services with customer interviews. That's so simple and so often overlooked. And many businesses fail because they skip this step. And either there was no need for the product in the market at all, or they just missed the opportunity to improve it before they took it to the market by looking for feedback. So, I mean, you think your idea is great, obviously, or you wouldn't be creating it, but you need to make sure your market likes it as much as you do. And if they don't, why not? So that you can fix it, you can change it, you can morph it into what your market is really going to want to buy from you. So without testing, you're guessing, and you do not want to risk your business future on guesswork. Plus, some of the best ideas are going to come from your customers. So why waste the opportunity to make your product or your service even better before you launch it, right? So, and the minimum viable product, it can be a very simple thing. You know, even if you don't want to do the pre-selling, maybe you create a landing page. So again, you just need the photos or the mock-ups of the product. You need some descriptions of the product. You can create a landing page where you get feedback from people where they sign up to go on your list. You could have different packages to test different price points. It's a really great way to do it. And we've got an entire podcast episode on how to do this. So if you go back to that One Step Empire podcast, it'll go in more detail on how you can actually do this with your minimum viable product. So your action items for this one are to come up with a minimum viable product that applies to your product or service, produce it, put it together, get it out there, and then test it. All right, and that's going to take you a little bit of time. That's not something you're going to get done today, but make some notes and get that on your calendar for the next couple of weeks. How are we doing down here? How's everybody doing in the comments? Let me just scroll down here and see. Jacqueline wants to have her first 100,000 plus year. Beautiful. Kaylee, hi Kaylee. Perfect. She's just building her plan. Lovely. All right, keep dropping them in there as we come through. So this one is probably the last one we're going to have time to talk about, but how much money do you need? Maybe we can sneak in another one, we'll see. To figure out how much money you're going to need for your startup, it's actually very simple. You want to work out your business and your personal budget, right? Because you're going to need money for both of those things. So from there, you can calculate what revenue your company needs to produce to cover both of those things, to grow the business and to pay your bills. Now, if you have another full-time job, or if you have another business, you're going to want to factor that in, right? The money coming from that business or from that other job is going to help support your personal expenses, for example. However, also keep in mind the time that you're taking from that other business or the time that you need to take from that other job, how much of that income will be lost while you're building this new business, because that's a very, very real consideration. If you're putting in, extra time every single week on this business, you may have to take less hours at your other business or your other job. So you want to figure out what that balance is, but figure out first your personal budget and your business budget for the first year and how much money you're going to need to cover both of those. It's a great idea to take a short course on financial management for small business just to make sure you have the basics under control as well, because unless you come from a bookkeeping or an accounting background, and I'm not saying you need to do all your own bookkeeping or accounting in your business, because if that's not your zone of genius, don't. Because what you pay for a bookkeeper, if it's really not your thing, you can often make back in deductions and all sorts of other things that you weren't even aware that you had available to you. So, but you still need to understand your finances. You still need to understand what the bookkeeper is doing. You still need to understand the reports that he's giving you. So whether you're going to do your own bookkeeping or accounting or not, I do suggest you take a short course on bookkeeping for small business, financial management for small business, that sort of thing. So you have the basics under control and you know what's going on in your business, whether you're doing the day-to-day bookkeeping or not. It's also important to prioritize your spending, because spending is the easy and the fun part. It's so easy to turn to that when the other stuff drags you down and rationalize that you're still doing the work, right? But things like inventory or supplies or rent or any kind of ongoing service fees, they can be put off to the last possible moment. It is likely going to take longer than you thought to get started, and even longer than that to turn a profit, right? So don't rush to make those purchases. As entrepreneurs, I find we tend to be optimists. We wouldn't be starting a business if we weren't. But it also means we tend to lean towards the best case scenario whenever we're planning, right? I know I do. So a good kind of tip is to double the time you're going to need to get your business up and running, double the amount of money you think you're going to need to get it started, and the number of issues and challenges you're going to have while you get it going, because we tend to go the other way when we're looking at the future scenarios. So keeping a tight rein on spending while you're getting your business started is really a smart strategy to make sure that you're going to have the funding when you need it. All right, so action items for budgeting is to, number one, complete your personal budget for the year. Number two, complete your business budget for the year. And number three, take some kind of small business bookkeeping or financial course. You can do that at a community college. You can do it online. Lots of places you could do it. They're available everywhere, and that will give you some confidence moving forward in your business so you understand all the terminology and all the reports and what's happening. All right, we've got a couple more minutes, so I'm gonna sneak into this one really quickly. Where can you get the money to start your business? Once you've got your financial plan laid out and you know how much money you're going to need to get up and running and stay operating for the first year, many new businesses will use a combination of personal savings, investments from friends, family, loans. Especially women, most women starting their businesses actually bootstrap it. We tend to not go for financing for a number of reasons. But there are other options out there, and certainly if these apply to you, it's a great thing to look at. Some other options are, credit cards. Be careful with credit cards. Obviously, they're easy to obtain. They're great for making purchases, but the interest rates are high, and if you can't pay off that balance each month, it's going to add up quickly. So stay away from credit cards if you can. Operating line of credit. So this is a loan with a set limit that you can draw on when you need to. The interest rates are lower than most credit cards and some loans. You can pay only interest on the outstanding balance, and there's no fixed payments other than a monthly fee and interest, meaning that you have the option to pay down the loan as you can afford it. But it's usually secured by an asset like your house or other assets. So that's the operating line of credit. Term loans are longer term options, usually used to cover expenses like equipment or renovations or large purchases. They're over a fixed term. They have a fixed repayment schedule. Usually, again, the lender is going to require security for the loan, like equity in your home or other assets. So you're going to need some assets and some good credit for that. Equity investors. This is one we hear and we often don't know what that term means. Those are just basically investors that are going to provide financing in exchange for a share of ownership or equity in your business. Now, that's different from venture capital. Venture capital is money that comes from a pool of investors who are looking for a very high rate of return on investment. And the other one we hear quite often are angel investors. And if you thought that angel investors were people that just gave you money for your business, you're not alone. A lot of people think that. But angel investors are going to want their money back. But generally, they're looking for higher risk investments with good growth potential. So they may not be, may not have any kind of security. They may not have it's secured by your assets. So it's a higher risk for them, but they're looking for something that's got some quick growth potential and some high return. So that's angel investors. Now, grants are a beautiful thing. If you can get your hands on grants, take it. Grants are money that does not require repayment. The criteria are usually very specific, and the application procedure can be long and time consuming, but if you can get your hands on grant money, by all means. Quite often they'll be available through different, quite often it's just like a socioeconomic type. They're trying to grow certain segments of the business, or like women in business, or minorities in business, that sort of thing. You'll see a lot of grants for that. You can start by looking at your local business associations. You can look at women in business groups near you. They will quite often have access to different funding. Lots of different ways. You can even just Google, women in business, or whatever your type of business is, grants, and start going through it that way. And again, it takes some time to apply for them, but it's literally money that you get to apply towards your business and don't have to pay back. So well worth it. Crowdfunding, we already talked about a little bit. This is using small amounts of money from a large number of investors. So it usually involves showing your business on a crowdfunding platform like I Fund Women, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. There's a ton of them. You can look them up. And then the general public can actually buy into your idea to support it, usually in exchange for like special first purchase options or other perks to pre-fund your idea. So that's a great one. Again, as I said, you get to test your market, and you also get the funding up front to produce your product. So it's a great way to get funding, and it's also a great way to make sure that people love your product, because they're not going to pre-order it if they don't love it. And you can see if you've got a few options there for your particular product or service, you can see which one everybody's buying, and you know that that's the way the market's going, and that's something that you want to really lean into. So that's called crowdfunding. Now, there are a lot of foundational steps to get your business up and running. And what we talked about here today are some really great ways to get started on the right foot and ensure your success later on as well.